Good morning and welcome back to the lecture series in animal physiology. So, we have finished 2 weeks, the very first 2 weeks, and in the first week talked about the introduction of the course, where we talked about the different level of organization from the molecular level to the cellular level to the tissue level. And in the very next week, we went on to study 2 systems, the integumentary system and the osseous tissue or the bones, bone and the cartilage, or rather other way, it's the cartilage and the bone, because formation of bone is from the cartilage. So, in that whole process, now we are well versed with the framework on which the shape of our body is being determined, which is the bony framework. Now, from here we will move on to the next level, which is the muscle which is covering the bone. So, we talked about the surface, the skin, epidermis, dermis. Then we went on to the bones, where we talked about the dermal bone, if you remember it, right. And now we will be talking about the muscle and the nerves. So, next 15 classes, precisely next 3 weeks, we will be devoting on the nervous system and part of the muscular system. So, talking about the muscular system, there is one small tail piece of the skeletal system which I did not cover last week, was our skeletal bones. So, our whole skeleton is formed of bones, right. So, these bones, they have a finite number, approximately 206 bones are there, and depending on their position and certain other functionalities, they are divided into 2 categories. It is called axial system, axial skeleton, and appendicular skeleton. Fine. What are the 2? Axial and the appendicular. Let me just for your, so this is, we are into week 3, lecture 1, 3/1, okay, and we will be talking about muscle and nerves. And before I talk about the muscle, a residual of the skeleton, what I was telling you is axial appendicular system. And there is another word which which is called articulations. So, these 2, axial and appendicular, these 2 are the broadest of the broadest classification of the bones which are present in our body. The reason why I skip it while teaching about the development of the bone is because there is another system which is one-to-one correlation of the appendicular and axial system, that is called axial muscles and appendicular muscles. So, what I will do, so do not think that I have not covered it. While I will be teaching about muscle, I will cover that part where we will have a one-to-one correlation of this but in nutshell, if you have to understand, it is very simple. Within your body there are 206 bones, and these bones are divided into 2 categories, axial bones, appendicular bones, and the muscle which form the covering on these different axial bones and appendicular bones falls under axial muscles and correspondingly appendicular muscles. Okay. But this is purely from the point of view of anatomy, which I will only infringe when I think that you guys needed to know that basic anatomy. Otherwise, my goal will be to give you an overall organization of the body and its fundamental physiological processes, which you can correlate with the molecular mechanisms. Fine. And the articulations, talking about the articulations, articulations are those joints. Suppose here, look at my fingers, like, and I can move the fingers like this. I can bend, bend the fingers like this. This is the part which moves. So those joints where all they are kind of splitting it up, those are forms under articulation. We'll talk about it while we'll talk, because there is a straight one-to-one relation with the bone, the cartilage and the muscle covering it, and how all these articulations functions. Okay. So that is the reason why I kind of did not went into the anatomical details of it, but we will come back while we will talk about muscle. With this, let us move on to what is muscle. Of course, by this time it must have been clear to you that suppose there is a bone like this, and you have the cartilage out here, and you have epiphyseal cartilage, articular cartilage, and top of that you have the muscle growing. Okay. So this is where the muscle is stopping it, right. Those of you who are non-vegetarian, they will be knowing it much better. From the leg pieces of chicken, you can see the muscle covering the bone, right. But is it that all those which cover the bones are muscles, or muscle is something much more broader? So, in order to visualize, if you touch here, you will see something is, there is a lup-tup sound, your heart is beating. What is that? That is also a muscle, right, but there is no bone there. You have never heard about cardiac bone or something of that sort. It is a mass of muscle which form a unique structure, where we will be talking about this muscle while we will talk about the heart. That is also a muscle. You eat the food, right. The food goes through your digestive tract. So, you must have heard that the food forms a bolus, like when we are very young, toddlers, our parent teaches us, then chew the food, chew the food, chew the food. Okay. So, you are chewing the food. So, what you are essentially doing, you are grinding it. In other words, what people do in a ball milling and all these kind of things, where they grind, or you go to a atta chakki or something, where you get the grains, grind them into small finer particles. In other words, you can even correlate it to the way people make nanoparticles. They take a big chunk of something x, y, z, and grind it, and goes to the smaller and smaller particle size. Okay. So it forms a bolus, and that bolus, which is formed in your mouth while you chew the food, moves through your alimentary canal in a mechanism called peristalsis. Just like a peristalsis pump, it moves like this. So it moves through a cavity which is made up of muscle. That is also not bone, right. So it's so the first thing, one, I wanted to put it in a very simplistic way, in a very crude way, is not that wherever there is a bone, there has to be a muscle, first and foremost thing. So muscle can be in other places too, and muscle can be standalone tissue systems, which we will be talking about these in different other fragments. So based on it, muscles, based on their function, based on their certain anatomical features, muscles are divided into three varied groups. Okay. The first one, so to talk about what I have just now talked, is the muscle what you see out here. These kind of muscles which are covering the bones, these are skeletal muscle. So, in other words, these are the one which are covering the skeleton, but this is not the real definition. I will come to that, but this is just for your kind of making a brain map, how you can identify randomly. If you see, you should be able to answer. If you go to an interview or somewhere, wherever, you should be able to it should strike you. The second one, what I talked to you in terms of the muscle. So, the muscle type we are talking about, this is one type, right. The second type, what I told you is, when you touch your out here in your chest, that beating sound, the lup dup, and that is what the second kind of, where there are no bones, right. So, those muscles are called cardiac muscle, part 2, okay, cardiac muscle. Third one, I told you, when you eat the food goes through the alimentary canal. I told you, and this movement is like a peristalsis movement, like a peristalsis pump. So, a bolus, so this is the bolus which is formed by chewing the food, it moves down like this. Okay. So, this is also formed, this whole canal or a cavity, alimentary canal or a cavity, whatever you call it, alimentary canal or a cavity. The muscle which are forming it is called smooth muscle. So, there are 3 kinds of muscle broadly classified in our body: skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle and smooth muscle. So, your brain map, whenever suppose you forget, what's a big deal, just look at your own body. So, physiology can be best learned if you know your own body. If you know your body, you will be able to figure it out. Now, what is the difference between all these things? Now, how you remember it, or how you kind of make a brain map of this? There has to be something unique, right? So, in order to understand the uniqueness of it, you look at your own body. These are our skeletal muscle, right? There are bones, radius, ulna and all those kind of things. And so, you do all your bodybuilding and all those things. You play football or you play handball or you play hockey or whatever, basketball, whatever games, cricket, whatever you like. The amount of force which is generated is amazing in these muscles, right? Or you do boxing and a number of things, okay, right? Now, if you compare the amount of force you exert using these muscles as compared to the way your heart beats. Say for example, go to a very silent room, take a stethoscope and place it here and try to hear the sound, tuck, 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 like this, okay. It will seem to you as if something is beating like this. So, in other words, there is a finite displacement which is taking place, okay, like this, as if you have a kind of a spring or something which you can stretch, but it does not go beyond it, okay. So, there is out here there is a finite stretch which is happening like this, whereas if you allow, when you allow the food to move, you do not even feel that something is moving, unless otherwise you are one of those people who does a lot of pranayamas and all those things, where you take a lot of water, salt water, and you vomit it out. You really never feel that there is an alimentary canal which is generating a certain amount of peristaltic force by virtue of which the food is moving. So, what is the common in the 3 examples I gave you? The first one I told you, you are playing basketball or you are playing hockey, football, cricket, you are throwing the ball. The force which is generated So, you take a spring or you take elastic, stretch it, or you do push-ups and everything. You can do a lot of push-ups and you can fold the whole body back, and if you are really fit, right. So, you will observe, and the second, let me summarize, sorry. Okay. So, if you see your heart, so it is a finite displacement. So, if you compare the displacement what you are doing while you are doing lot of those push-ups and everything, as compared to the displacement here, you will see the displacement which is taking place out in the cardiac tissue or in the heart is much more lesser as compared to the displacement which is, you never feel that something is moving like that, you do not even feel it, right. So, common word, the one common word which is emerging out of it is called force and displacement. These are the common word, force and displacement. And when we talk about displacement, we talk about per unit area displacement. Okay? So, by default, by your sheer common sense, you do not study any physiology, anything, you should be able to tell the maximum displacement you see will be in the skeletal muscle, right, as compared to the cardiac or as compared to the smooth muscle. Plus the force generation will be maximum in the skeletal muscle. So, based on the force generation, that you will be able to classify it, but that is not enough, right. I just say this is a very qualitative feature, that there is it can be a quantitative feature, sorry, I will take back my word. Yes, you can quantify the force, but force will not tell you. Say for example, let us go to the next slide. So, what all we talked about? So, we talked about classifying the muscle in terms of, okay, let us class. So, you have skeletal muscle, you have cardiac, and you have a smooth muscle, right. And then we talked about the generation of force. Force and displacement, I am keeping it all together. Displacement is the per unit, displacement taking place in the fibers. We will come about what we call as fibers and everything. Okay. So, we see here we are having maximum amount of force generated as compared to this. Of course, I would say slightly smaller arrow here and even a smaller arrow here. Okay. Fine. So, here we see maximum force generation. So, yes, you can quantify this parameter. This is a quantifiable parameter, and always remember something quantifying, something which you cannot quantify, something which you cannot measure is very irrelevant in terms of any kind of analysis. I can see a qualitative thing, but with whom I can compare that? How I can develop a scale out of it? Without that scale, nothing makes sense. I mean, everything. So, always remember, unless we can quantify, there is no point. So, force or displacement, yes, you can quantify. It is a quantifiable parameter. But then, when you see the muscle, say for example, a muscle tissue like this, and you say that, okay, so for example, this is the muscle tissue, and you say, okay, this particular say x unit area, unit mass or unit volume generate maximum force, say if it is a skeletal muscle or lesser, and so you can quantify it. Okay, you can see how much it is stretching, based on the stretch. These dotted lines are showing that you are stretching the muscle like this, you are stretching it like this, and you can calculate the amount of displacement in force, and of course, you can quantify it. But this does not tell you anything about the structural detail of the muscle, because if a muscle is stretching, some X muscle is stretching more than Y muscle, it means there has to be some molecular differences between them. Do you agree with me or not? Think over it. And where the molecular differences will come. Now go back to the fundamental. The first week, whole week what I spent. I told you that there are different level of organization. What are those organization level? Let us recall. You have molecular level of organization, you have cellular level of organization, you have tissue level of organization, you have organ level of organization. These are the level of organization. And the reason why I put a pyramid like this, these are the smallest ones. So, it means, and within the molecules, what are the molecules which matters for us in biology? Proteins, nucleic acid, okay, carbohydrates, lipids, water, and metal ions and different electrolyte which constitute the cations and the anions. Okay. So, these are the molecular level of organizational details. Okay. Based on that, we moved on to the cell. Now, when we talk about a tissue, so here what we are dealing with is the muscle tissue. So, there are three kinds of muscle tissue we talked about. So, what we are essentially telling is that when we talk about tissue, what we say, there is a molecular level of organization that leads to the formation of some form of self assembly, which leads to the formation of a cell, and which has a nucleus. I am just putting N here, which has a cytoplasm. I am putting CY, and which has a cell membrane CM, right. And there are different of these cells which comes together. These are individual cells which comes together to form what we call as tissue, right. Now, we say this tissue A versus this tissue B versus this tissue C, and ABC here, say for example, I say skeletal muscle as A, cardiac muscle as B, and smooth muscle as C. They generate different kind of force. Now, that boils down that force generation is taken care by some of the molecules which are present in these individual cells which are forming this tissue mass. It means there are certain molecular differences in them, and from where this molecular difference arises. Okay? So, we are all convinced based on our day to day experience that these different muscle tissue generates different level of forces, but then how this molecular differences get orchestrated, right. Now, that brings us to the next level of organization in order to understand the muscle, from molecular to the cellular to the tissue level. But in order to appreciate that, what is most important is that we understand the process of formation of muscle formation, how muscle is formed. Without understanding the muscle formation, we will never be able to appreciate those molecular players who are dictating that how much force will be generated from individual muscles. Okay. So, at this point, I will close in with this class that your first and foremost idea should be, whenever you study a system, you have to understand the broad spectrum of it. And from there, once you understand the broad picture of it, then you have to slowly narrow down to the molecular players. So, what we did here, so we talked about the different kind of organs today. We talked about the skeleton, okay, and we talked about the muscle covering the skeleton, right? Okay. So, I started with that example. Second, what we did, we talked about the cardiac system or your heart. We talked about the heart, which is an organ, and we talked about the cardiac muscle. Then we talked about the digestive system, or essentially we talked about the alimentary canal, and there we talked about the smooth muscle. So, you see, from the organ we went back to the tissue level, and now we wanted to understand the cellular and the molecular players who are orchestrating this different force generation. Okay. So, in order to understand, as I am telling you, one has to understand how these different muscles are formed and what are those molecular players and how this force generation is being dictated. And here let me tell you one more thing. This whole muscle biology, what we will be dealing here today, will be dealt at different parts. Like we will talk about the cardiac muscle while we will be talking about the heart system. We will talk about the smooth muscle while we will talk about the alimentary system or the digestive system, and we will talk about the skeletal muscle in the next class and thereafter, because that is the first one we will be dealing with, which is kind of, you can say that that is the model system based on which all these others are derivatized. Okay. But we will talk about the molecular players initially and the cellular development, and then we will classify it. So, this whole muscle thing will continue for a while in the nerve muscle, then for the cardiac, and then into the digestive system. So, this will be a long journey of muscle, but this is the beginning where from a layman perspective you should be able to appreciate that how these muscles are located at different part of your body. Not only they are covering the bones, they stand alone in conjunction with the nervous system, form structures which help in blood circulation in terms of the heart, help in your digestion of food in terms of the alimentary canal, and several other critical function. Okay? And one of the underlying theme of classifying muscle is force and the displacement which it execute, how it does so. Okay? So, in the next class we will talk about the muscle differentiation, muscle formation, and the different force generation. Thank you.